I'm trying to coexist, exist. Yeah, I'm trying to coexist, exist. I'm trying to coexist.
We are currently facing a competence crisis. While 82% of men are considered accidental or unfit for their roles, according to Gallup, our hiring process has become obsessed with the performance. We have fallen into a psychological trap. We hire actors who say what we want to listen to, who mirror our own traits and compose themselves the way we want them to, then act surprised when they lack the ethical resilience to handle reality, to handle people, and to lead them towards growth. This is what I call the corporate theater, a high-stakes play where the script is just a cultural fit and the cost is your company's soul and the time that you will never get back. I will give you an example. The collapse of Enron wasn't just a huge financial failure and a robbery. It was a psychological failure. How? It proved that the human brain is easily tricked and seduced by the smartest guys in the room. The phenomenon known as the halo effect. We believe smart people are savior, especially when their intentions are not the best. We often confuse a common trait like charisma aligns us to a total lack of character. Let's fast forward this to today, 2026, and we have institutionalized the blindness. We've turned the interview into a corporate theater, filtering for actors that provide zero friction and zero growth. An actor can challenge themselves to act as a leader, but can they act upon lead to guide people? We're here to talk about the persona fit. We look at why culture has become a cage for original thoughts. And we'll ask the defining question of your career. What does that look like when your creativity is put on hold? Is your team following you or just a lie? It's time to start understanding and stop hiring for the applause and hire for the evolution of the soul, the mind, and true freedom of growth in the workplace. Let's start. Welcome to the Ethics Guild podcast, where we explore human experiences. You probably ask yourself, in today's era, why an entry-level job requires a high educational background, high achievement, experience? What does entry-level really mean today that was different 20 years ago? We're also going to touch base on what does being overqualified for a job is. What does that mean? Where did it come from? A lot of these stigmas come from a retaliation to filter actors and not leaders. Should you be punished for knowing more if you decide to look for a job with less responsibility? Who is setting up these rules and why? We are going to dismantle the invisible psychological architectures of the modern workplace, human resources, which is the gatekeeper, following orders from those above, and how does it affect your human truth, your life, your career. To start, we have to understand that we live in a crisis of character and competence, and we also have to understand the very system designed to find the best quote-unquote talent, teams, leaders, etc. And understanding these filters, we understand that they have become sophisticated filters for compliance rather than capability. How much did this influence leadership and mentorship in a place of work? Could this bring the psychological erosion in the work? Because if you hire an actor, not a leader, what is leading you? Is an actor going to have your best interest as they act only for themselves and not for you? This is why we see the corruption of an entry-level standard and the dangerous preference for actors over leaders. But we should ask ourselves, why actors? Because actors can fool you. They will put on the performance to save their skin. Leaders don't act that way. They act with integrity and they move forward together. I want you to think, if you are in a position at work where you feel stuck, where you feel like you're not moving, you're not growing, you haven't grown in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, this episode is for you. You need to understand why you're not moving, why you're stuck in the system, why as hard as you try, your act is not good enough for a promotion. So to understand this, let's start with the persona filter. Why we hire actors, not leaders. In the modern corporate theater, the interview has shifted from a technical assessment to a performance piece. We have created a system that rewards the right quote-unquote person, the polished, the high energy, the loud, the extrovert. Oh, and we applaud even better if they're yes-saying. These kind of individuals are the ones that are being targeted for these leadership positions, while often filtering out the resilient, the solution-oriented, the creative, and the truly competent. The one that seeks to understand, but with the intention of growing with their team and challenging whatever is impeding them to do their job well as they protect the well-being of their own leaders and their team. What is the big problem is that HR prioritizes cultural fit, a term that has become a psychological euphemism for lack of friction. Let's think about what lack of friction will do to us. If we are not challenged because the diversity of criteria, beliefs are not there, that all that we will find is compliance, obedience, the same. And why is that? Because HR is looking for candidates who mirror their own behaviors and biases. And this is how they're led to hire people. Think about it. If you hire somebody with the same biases, it avoids conflictiveness or conflictions, but it demotes challenges. It demotes the ability to adapt to new ideas, new concepts. It narrows the mind to think that they only have to associate with what they're comfortable with. And that is very destructive. This is very common to see that HR hires for impression management. Someone with a nice smile, someone with beauty in most cases, somebody that's charismatic on the outside. And to make matters worse, they know what storytelling tropes to use to trigger a connection, an emotional hit in the inner. Literally, they study their way in, but never study the lives that they're going to impact once they are in there, leading projects, people, and goals. When we hire for persona over competence, we signal to the existing team that their hard work, their hard-won results matter less than their ability to perform a script. This is why a lot of employees stop believing in the chain of command. They stop believing that they have an opportunity and a chance because deep inside they know they're different, and that difference separates them from the possibilities of growth. And this is why a lot of people bounce around from job to job until they find, quote unquote, the cultural fit for them. But what does this create? It creates cognitive dissonance, especially for high performers. They see a leader hired who doesn't have it. They lack the grit to fight for the team, but has the charisma to win a board meeting, to be liked at the management sessions. How does that help these subordinates? We have to check the reality of the fit in today's era. There is interview bias, which is discriminatory. Subjective judgments lead to a 10% systemic loss in talent, quality at scale. And why are we talking about the charisma trap? Let's remember back in 2001 in the collapse of Enron, which should serve us as the ultimate warning. Their leadership was famous for hiring the smartest people in the room. They came from every prestigious university and companies. It was all about based on academic prestige and high-stake performance. But yet they lacked the ethical resilience, value, moral, and practical competency to handle reality, especially when they had to face it. Choosing instead to maintain a facade of success through deception. What I'm trying to say here is that people that have a persona filter will lie at any cost to maintain the status quo because they don't want to see that tainted in their resume. So what am I proposing to change this outcome of incompetent leaders in our corporations, in our government? We have to start moving from this whole tell me a story about your success in a place of work. Tell me, how did you move this KPI? How did you inspire your team? How do you inspire yourself? Stories, which are all metrics, KPI driven simulations. It's all about the number. We must replace how did you handle conflict, and be honest with yourself. Are you always telling the truth when they ask you these questions? And we need to replace these questions with, here's a scenario, here's a data set and a failing project. Show us the three first moves you take to stabilize the team. We need to stop interviewing for the memory or to listen to what we want to hear, and we need to start interviewing for the present of a skill, criteria, values, morals, and ethics, because that's exactly what your team is going to see day by day when you hire a leader. Well, I'll leave you with this question. Were you able to be yourself when you got interviewed for your job? Were you 100% honest with all your answers? And did your interviewer challenge you to not only make you feel comfortable and bring down your guard, but also were they okay with you being who you really are. This leads me to also thinking about what has led us to many conflicts with interview. The credential inflation. Theory versus the that scared truth, or in this case, experience. Why are we undermining experience over academic achievement? Also, why is it so underpaid? This is what's causing this era of high standards for entry-level jobs. And it has been corrupted by human resources corporations that believe they can do whatever they want. Because think about this. We see, and for those that are in link, please, this is for you because you are in a position of leadership. We're starting to see entry-level postings requiring 3 to 5 years of experience and a master's degree. What are we trying to achieve with this? Isn't this elitism? Why are we overvaluing academic achievement, which is a largely measure of theoretical compliance? While we're undervaluing life or lived experiences, should you not give credit to a single mother that works 2 jobs and put their daughters into college? Isn't that true leadership? Solution orientation, time management, dedication, resilience, punctuality, determination, teamwork, and so many other skills put into one basket that we undermine. Isn't the experience of that single mother that has to sacrifice so much more than someone that just knows the theory but not the practice? I will give you an example of this. In my times of management, I remember seeing people with master's degree, bachelor's, and including PhDs that had no experience at the workplace. And yet, when they came in, they were just like a new hire with no degree. They didn't know any better. They had to be trained to understand what their work looked like every day. It's not like they came in knowing what to do 100%. They had to learn this. Everyone has to go through a process of learning, no matter if you have the diploma or not. Anyone can be trained to do a job well if given the chance. Experience is the potent mixture of theory, practice, and the most important, the psychological scars of failing. When we are okay with failure, we understand what it takes to grow. And when we understand what it takes to grow, we become solution oriented. We prioritize through our emotional scar to always reason to find the end of the tunnel and educate those coming to not make the same mistakes. This is how mentorship is created. I'm not trying to put down academic achievement because it's also important because it forms a criteria. It makes you think. But what is our school's designed for? It's designed for you to pass. And it doesn't matter how you pass, either learning or cheating. They don't teach you what a leadership environment really looks like, which should teach you how to bleed for your team's win, how to earn their trust, and how to become one with your team. Genuinely, we're seeing the psychological impact of lack of leadership at the workplace. You're loving the Ethics Skill podcast? Don't want to miss any new episodes? Want to be part of our panel and be our guest? Subscribe, leave us a comment, like, be part of the community of the Ethics Skill podcast. We need more people we need people that are brave, to speak up for what's right, to stand for justice and dignity. Become one of us. Be part of the Ethics Skill podcast community. And let's journal to endless possibility where we all become one. Don't forget, subscribe. This inflation creates learned helplessness in the younger workforce as the skill sets are not being trained and taught for others to be successful. People are just being told what to do and not really trained on how to do it. In late 2025, the underemployment rate for recent graduates hit 4.25%. 42.5%. That's almost 50% of newly grad, the highest since 2020. We're telling a new generation that no matter how much they learn, they're still unqualified until they have spent years in the very role they're being blocked from entering. How hypocritical are we becoming as a society? Comment? What will you do to change that? Are you one of those students that believes that this is unfair and you don't deserve it? You need an opportunity and a chance. And to understand this better, we need to understand the skill gap. A 2025 Cengage report found that while 89% of educators believe students are workforce ready, 71% of employers now requires degrees for roles that didn't need them a year, yet they still rank job-specific technical abilities as their top concern. The question is, what made them change within a year this criteria? Are they paying more for this same job position? This is a good question we should ask those in leadership that make these decisions without any explanation. It's almost like we're gentrifying the workplace, just like we do when we put high-rise skyscrapers and we increase rent to move and gentrify people that used to live there, to put the new wave of people into a city that's going to pump more money. We see this happening in the workforce, and we need to start holding these leaders that come with this criteria and is changing the game accountable one by one. I encourage you to look deep into yourself, because for those that are above them making these rules, these gatekeepers, I'm pretty sure you have kids. Are your kids going through the same problem that those with less facing? And if we're going to talk about how a degree is so important, let's focus on the value of the non-degree leader. What do they bring? What is different about them? Is it their hunger, their desire to win, the desire to prove themselves wrong, to be creative, to be pioneer? Let's consider Henry Ford or Steve Jobs. We can also throw in there Bill Gates. None of them relied on high-level academic success or credentials to revolutionize their industry. They relied on their iterative, practical experience of building, failing, and living through the theory of the real world, which is irreplaceable. What I'm proposing here, that we should have an experience equity standard. Companies should weight 1 year of high stakes, relevant work experience as equal to 2 years of general academic study. We must prioritize portfolio over parchment. Why? Because the next Henry Ford could be knocking on your door and he can revolutionize your industry. You don't even know it, just because he doesn't have a piece of paper that costs so much money and gives you a piece of paper that credits you a professional in theory, not in practice. This leads me to this ultimate question. Why do we trust so much in a piece of paper from an institution that hasn't changed much over a candidate who has successfully proven themselves in the industry and brings life experience as a way of validating their skill sets? So we have this dilemma about competency versus paper diversity, right? Because nowadays it's all about diversity. It's all about inclusion. What does that really mean? Are they doing it for the right reason? Do they have the real good intentions? And I'll be honest with you, we have to touch on this nerve-wracking topic in HR today. The use of diversity metrics to look good on paper rather than hiring for competency, regardless of background. The problem is when HR uses diversity as a checkbox exercise as to looking good, or for whom? Acceptance from the public, perhaps? Hiring for race or origin to meet a quota rather than seeking the most competent individual for the job position. It's definitely a double-edged sword, especially in discrimination. It is discriminatory because it devalues the actual achievements of minority hires who now have to fight the psychological stigma that they were a diversity hire rather than the best person to fulfill the job. This leads to tokenism, which breeds deep distrust. Have you ever had a manager that you notice wasn't good at their job and that you could do better than that given the opportunity? In 2025, studies found that diversity hire who lacks the competency to lead, it destroys the psyche of the minority group, which feels misrepresented, and the majority group, which feels that the system is rigged. How can you trust the system? How can you trust the decisions made? Question is, do you trust how things are being done in your workplace? Comments? And let's not forget about how we filtering resumes. And there is an AI bias because we create the biases. We program AI. So guess what? You are going to have AI bias. So in 2025, research from the University of Washington shows that unless bias is blatantly obvious, humans are 90% likely to adopt the biases of the AI hiring tools they use. If the AI is programmed to hit a quota, the human recruiter will ignore a more qualified candidate just to justify the algorithm's fairness, quote unquote, metric. So what am I trying to say? HR's comfort over investigating beyond the tools they use. And I get it. You have to go through many candidates. But where is your professional ethic? If your job and only job is to hire the best, most qualified and competent employees and leaders, will you trust AI to take care of your child? This is the kind of responsibility we should have when we're hiring personnel. Comment? And just to prove a point, data shows us also that teams with authentic diversity, different language, backgrounds, culture, and including managerial styles, outperform others only when those individuals are empowered by leadership, and more importantly, when they're competent. Tokenism leads to lower morale and higher turnover. It's proven. If you've been jumping from job to job, you're a testimony of what I'm talking about. But what is our solution? We should do the first 2 rounds of any interview should be based on skill output only. No names, no photos, no schools. Let's check what that behavior looks and how safe you feel with yourself going in an interview, competing without having pedigree or status. How competent are you with yourself? How do you perform when you have nothing besides yourself? How will you behave knowing that you don't have the upper hand? This forces us to hire the best brain for the task. And also, we check the emotional intelligence of how this person survives these 2 rounds. We check the behavior. True diversity will follow naturally because talent is globally distributed, even if opportunity is not. But the question is, are we really celebrating diversity in the workplace as they want us make believe? Or are we just using people's identities as a shield to hide our inability to measure true human potential? I was actually reflecting about that last question myself, and it brought me to thinking about why we hire yes-sayers. We must address why corporate leadership actively avoids evolutionaries. Why are they afraid of having people that will not only challenge themselves, but they will challenge the norm. They will challenge how things are done. When they're seeking efficiency, when they see a problem, they bring a new solution to the table. Why are leaders afraid of that? Leaders will listen to those above, but not those below. Why? Because HR departments are designed to maintain the status quo. They want to keep those low, and those high. It's very simple. Look at the statistics. I'm basing myself not on how I feel. I'm basing myself on real data and statistics. This is why they seek yes-sayers. Why? Because these individuals are so predictable. Think about it. If you know that everything you will say is yes, how much easier it is for you to plan anything and have these individuals comply with it. And think about a person who wants to evolutionize the workplace. It seems like a high risk, unstable, unpredictable, unmanageable. Even if the current agenda was failing, they wouldn't take a risk because they would rather lose at their own game than having someone save them that were different than them. Have you experienced this at your workplace? When you had the solution to a problem that can save millions of dollars and save people's work, and yet the company went down. Toys R Us is a very good example of that. Managers kept talking about the problem, and yet the executives never listened. But I want to think about also the psychological effect, how this creates a caste system for ideas. If solution comes from the bottom or the middle, and it is ignored because the leadership is fully invested in their own flawed moral and model, this leads to moral injury for the employees who see the solution but are forbidden from implementing them. What happens is then the employee eventually stops trying. They do the bare minimum. They lose hope, leading to a zombie workforce that only works to the rule. And yet, those leaders that have created this experience would ask the employee, why are they doing the bare minimum? Why are not they exceeding expectation? And the answer, the leader should know the answer more than the employee, because they have created this psychological toll on them. And this also leads to a toxic environment. Toxic leadership has cost the U.S. $190 billion annually in health-related expenses. In 2025, 76% of employees in toxic environment reported that their mental health significantly declined. This leads me to the Kodak lesson. I don't know if you guys remember the cameras. Kodak camera, very popular, 70s, 80s, 90s. Number one, Kodak invented the digital camera back in 1975, but their leadership invested in the paper and film agenda. They refused to evolve. They hired and promoted for the old world, for how things were, what made them successful in the past, until the new world came and made them completely obsolete. This is what happens when we don't bring evolutionary employees into our workplace. At some point, your comfort is going to be your own destruction. How do we fix this problem? We need to implement challenge culture, KPIs for leaders. A manager's success should be measured not just for results or output, but also by how many bottom-up innovations they successfully champion and implement, and how many contributions from his or her team created that difference as well. Because let's not forget that it's not only your idea, but the best ideas and solutions come from your own team if you learn how to listen, and if you experiment, and if you get the data later, if what you implemented brought efficiency. Because now let's say that the employee with that idea created efficiency and you empowered and invested in them and that idea. Think about how that employee will feel. And also, how will that help in their career? Because that's one thing we have to really understand. When people work, they're putting their life in line. They're putting time that they never get back. You are responsible. Leaders are responsible for people's life as much as you believe it's not. Time is something you never get back. That's exactly what people put in their workdays. Time they could have done something better with their lives. And it's in your hands to lead them towards prosperity, to lead them towards success, to help them and mentor them, to shape their lives, their mind, their intention, their moral. Leaders are responsible for people's lives. Simple as that. And this is what we have to stop being naive and ask ourselves, is your company currently hiring the person who will solve problems? Or will they hire a person who would make you feel like the problems don't exist? Comment. I would love to hear what you have to say about this, because I'm pretty sure you've seen it all out there, but you don't speak because you're afraid of retaliation, because that's the first thing they will shout, that you're being insubordinate for being outspoken and different. We need to move beyond the who and the how to the soul of the hiring process. We explore the one thing algorithm cannot calculate and a script cannot fake, identifying true human potential through behavior. Emotional intelligence, EQ, how people act, is normally how they think. We have to live beyond the goals of Adam Smith and see how we turn his wealth of nation into a wealth of filter compliance. And perhaps if we have the right emotional intelligence, we will start hiring for pulse, not just for profile. Because think about it, if a persona is a mask that someone wears to hide themselves, their true identity, emotional intelligence is the heartbeat. Emotional intelligence makes you aware of who you really are and the acceptance that you're not there to become perfect, but to strive towards excellency. And when we strive towards excellency, we are okay with failure, because it's part of becoming an excellent leader. You are okay having others lead where you are fragile. You're able to recognize your limitations as well. And this is why most interviewers wear a mask as well. And within the mask they wear, they are designed to find someone that looks like a leader. But let's define that. What makes you look like a leader? Is leadership a physique? Is leadership a look, an attire, how you speak, how you dress up, how you comb your hair? But the question is, can HR find someone that can feel like a human under pressure and handle reality? Handle it without lying. Handle it with transparency, where they evoke their team to rise to the occasion with them, where they don't segregate their fears. They're open to their vulnerability. They're open for everyone to seeing their wounds, because they also know how to heal their own wounds and heal others. When they're communicating all the things that he can do and all the things that he needs his team to perform where he needs help, can HR hire for it? The question is also, are they looking for that? Perhaps that's not what they look for. Until we stop focusing on hard skills and storytelling, as we neglect self-regulation and empathy, we're only going to hire leaders that can definitely perform a great speech, but they will crumble on the under a private conflict with themselves and with their own team. We ignore the candidate's ability to recognize their own emotional trigger, the very things that make them micromanage or shut down when a team member brings them a problem. We need to hire leaders that have a relationship with fear and they have a relationship with purpose. Because how can you have a relationship with purpose if you don't know and you can identify what is your fear trying to tell you, how it has become your moral compass to not only guide yourself, but to guide others to feel safe? Has your fear created competency and safety in yourself rather than an external factor? If you're out there, what is your biggest weakness? We should reflect or engage on reflective inquiry. How can we do a very good interview if we don't interview ourselves with honesty about the things we can and can't do? If you are a yes-sayer, how often do you lie to yourself and you lie to others, pretending to be something you don't have to be, because you can just be you and still lead well? It's okay to say no. No is as good as yes, because no is having healthy boundaries for yourself, because as human beings, we cannot achieve everything, and it's okay to not achieve everything if we achieve what we're skillfully made for and it's important for us. What are the questions we should start asking? Because think about this. Fear makes us moody, right? We constantly have hormones that make us feel human. We should be making questions about how do we handle and how do we neutralize emotion, because those emotions are going to trigger how we are going to perform when we act upon something or a project or with people. We should start asking more about, tell us about a time when your mood negatively impacted your work. How did you recognize it? And what did you do to neutralize it for the sake of the team? Think about how much maturity you need to have to answer this question. And if we want to ask a question about authority, let's ask, tell us about a time a subordinate was right and you were wrong. Walk us through the physical and emotional sensation of that realization. How did you reflect upon that? How did you handle the public correction? These questions, they're not only based on behavior and emotional intelligence, but it will expose the quality of human reasoning that you have to still feel afraid, uncomfortable, and yet you're able to neutralize those emotions for the better good of you and the team, and to bring the very best out of you and the rest that rely on you as well. And we have to stop looking for the pause, like somebody has to answer like it's like they're reading a script. It's okay to pause. Remember that high EQ and IQ people do not have instant polished answers. They reflect. When somebody asks you these questions, it's okay to say to your interview, can I think about this for 5 minutes? Why you'd want to do that is because that is the normal way of reflecting about something well. And it shouldn't be looked as a failure if you ask for time. That's actually showing the responsibility you have to be truthful to your answer and start feeling what that felt before and being able to communicate. Also, use the 5-second pause if you're speaking, so that way you can name the emotion before you tame with your response. This is the difference between a reactive manager and a responsive leader. If your interview process doesn't make you feel good or safe about your failure, how can you expect them to lead a team through a crisis? And remember, crises are chaotic. You're supposed to feel the burn, the stress, and afraid. Common. We also have to understand the corrupted invisible hand. Adam Smith versus the algorithm. We have to understand the philosophical foundation of our work market. Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, envisioned a free market driven by the invisible hand. But what is the problem with Smith's model? It was built on an individual agency and the natural liberty of labor to move where it is most valued. However, we have corrupted this system. We have corrupted it into a systematic filtering. Today, the invisible hand is actually a visible algorithm. The question is, who's policing the algorithm? Who is checking for the unbiased or biased programming? There is no police besides those inputting their own programs for their conveniences. We use AI to filter 75% of our resume before a human being ever sees it, often based on narrow keywords that has nothing to do with competency. We use pre-employment testing that filters for compliance rather than innovation. And yet, the propaganda we use is we want creative minds. Is that really true? This year, 87% of companies are using AIs as their principal recruit. Yet 35% of recruiters admit these tools exclude unique, non-traditional talents. What I mean is the very resilient, creative people, the spirits that Smith believed drove economic success. That's what's being excluded, because AI cannot see or cannot understand or feel how to measure these capabilities. Well, also Adam Smith warned us that employers will always tactically combine to keep wages low and labor immobile, always to the best interest. Think about this. Companies, corporations, CEOs think alike. They become one to control. The question is, why haven't the employees done this? And they are the vast majority. Adam Smith believed that the wealth of nations came from the division of labor. But he also was aware, and he probably warned us, that repetitive, uninspiring work makes humans as stupid and ignorant as it is possible for a human creature to become. Repetitive work serves its purpose, but at some point it will stop producing dopamine, and it will stop stimulating for the right reason, leaving numbness and emptiness in the mind of the employee. And think about, by hiring just sayers and filtering for the right persona, we are creating the exact intellectual stagnation that so much Smith feared. We have turned the free market of labor into a fixed market of profile. We no longer hire human. We hire human capital data points, especially when we prioritize looking good on paper over the practical mixture of theory and practice. We're not following Smith's model. We have forgotten about it because of greed. We are creating a corporate feudalism where the elite HR executive, the C-suite, decides the persona, and the workforce must conform or starve. Those are the only two options they give you. And this is why this minority controls the majority. They are united. The majority is not. What could we do to change that before it hits catastrophic measurement, such as the French Revolution? History does repeat itself, but it could also be avoided if we learn the lesson. To me, the interview panel shouldn't be HR anymore, or the managers in these positions. It should be a peer group. The people who would work with these candidates are the only ones that can truly sense if someone is an actor or a leader. Do they have the best interest for them? Because the biggest winners, if a good leader comes, is not only the company, but the employees under that leader. For that, we need to have competency transparency. We need to stop hiring for quote unquote diversity as a checkbox and start hiring for cognitive diversity, different criteria, evolutionary mindset. This only happens when we stop using AI as the main decider, especially if the AI is programmed to find people like us culture fits. We need to start using AI to find brains that challenge us, that makes us better, that will push us to the next step, to the next stage, that will innovate what we haven't even thought needed to be innovated, that are unafraid of taking risks, because that risk can lead to the biggest innovation in their company. This leads to this trust deficit. 66% of US adults say they will not even apply for a job if they know that AI is making the primary decision. We're losing the best talents because they refuse to be treated like a data point. And let's think about who wants to be just a number. When you are in the military, you are government property. You're not even a human being anymore until you regain your freedom once you finish your contract. Is this the same experience we're getting in the workplace? You're just a number ID. And yet the propaganda is you are a human, we value. The Ethics Guild podcast isn't just about following the rules, because there are healthy rules we should follow that will definitely make us. But the Ethics Guild podcast is about breaking the rule that makes us less human, that make us become segregated in prison encaged in a system that wants to keep you there. We must stop hiring for the agenda, and we must start hiring for the evolution. No matter how that evolution comes, shape and form. And I will leave you with this. Adam Smith believed that when individuals are free to pursue their own interests, they inadvertently benefit society. If your employees were truly free to challenge your current agenda today, will your company still be standing tomorrow? Or is your persona felt the only thing keeping it alive?